National Chief, thanks so much for being with us. Wild night. Votes are still being counted. 2 leaders have lost their seats. Your thoughts on what unfolded and continues to unfold here?
Absolutely. Look, first of all, I want to congratulate Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberal Party of Canada on a successful election last night. I look forward to working with them in the days ahead and working with all parties. I also want to, congratulate, of course, the Green Party, Elizabeth May and Jonathan, and I want to lift them up. I also want to lift up Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada, and, of course, Jagmeet Singh on behalf of the Assembly of First Nations. We lift you all up and thank you and your families for the dedication to this campaign. We also want to uplift and thank all federal party leaders that came and met with the Assembly of First Nations and to talk about our relationship with First Nations and the Government of Canada. It's not always easy to have these discussions, but all 4 of these leaders stepped up during this campaign period and spoke to our people. And we appreciate that so very much. I also want to thank the 23 First Nation candidates from coast to coast to coast from all political parties that ran for us. I remember growing up on a First Nation community, and even just to see one First Nation person on a ballot somewhere was a really big thing. So to see 23 people step forward and say that they want to serve their country, we lift you up, and whether you were successful or not is not the point. The point is you've done well for us and we're so proud of you. We're also so proud of every First Nation voter. There was just massive amounts of young voters coming up, and even though we were only allowed to vote from the 1960s, we lift our people up. And look, there's lots of issues to do, lots of work to be done. And, it was, surprising in certain areas, but we also, I think of chiefs, our previous chiefs that did these roles, like Grand Chief Mandy Gall-Massey, who's now sitting, in Quebec, and former Chief Billy Morin of Enoch Cree, that's, sitting for the Conservative Party in Alberta, just so many. And I just, we lift up our people in a good way, and we thank them for their commitment. I think I would also say to all political parties, which I have said in the past, to make sure when you have a First Nation person running in your party, you're blessed for that, and to make sure that you give them a proper winnable riding, and to make sure that when we do have people, that we had successful last night, that we don't tokenize people, that we make sure that we give them proper roles and utilize their expertise, because you're seeing, political parties could really see what Canada really is when they have First Nations people at the table.
It was great to see all the party leaders get together with the AFN, but for the most part, issues important to First Nations seemed like they were on the back burner during this election campaign. Are you concerned that that will remain the case in this deeply divided incoming House of Commons? Look,
there's colonialism, U.S. colonialism at our borders, and I know that Canada's looking for a new way to do, to work on making Canada the best that it can be, and to work on infrastructure. And I just heard the Prime Minister again today talk about infrastructure last night, and infrastructure projects and big projects across this country will not happen without First Nations at the table. And I just hope that we've learned something over the past few decades. It's that if Canada wants to move forward, they're going to have to make sure that First Nations leadership is at the table as we think through our next steps. We do have a changing landscape in the world, and we certainly cannot rely on the United States anymore. And I think that we have to start diversifying ourselves around the globe, but at the same time, we need to do it in a responsible and respectful way towards First Nations people.
National Chief, any worries that we're about to head back into another election pretty soon, and that issues like child welfare, clean water, Jordan's Principle go unaddressed?
Look, we're going to be back to work in Ottawa first thing tomorrow morning, making sure that we're pushing our issues, to making sure that the water legislation that was committed to First Nations gets back on track. We'll be talking to all political parties on all of these issues, as we have been during the campaign. There's always, I just think we can't focus on that. We have to focus on getting work done, and there's too many issues left outstanding that we need progress. And we have to close the gaps that exist. And in order to make Canada one of the head of a G7 country, Canada is going to have to invest in First Nations people very quickly to close that gap. They had a commitment to close the infrastructure gap to 2030, which means more schools being built, more homes being built, investments into our children to make sure that Jordan's Principle and is running the way that it should, and at the same time making sure that kids have access to healthcare and First Nations have access to healthcare. So lots of issues that need to be dealt with that are not being, that have been kind of slow in the past few months because there's been all this political unrest in Ottawa. And I think that, I'm glad that there's a government now, because it hadn't been. I mean, I went to the Pope's funeral this weekend, and that was a bit chaotic because there wasn't really a solid government here at home to be able to organize that in a good way and to make sure that that's moving. So little things like that, you kind of recognize it as, and knowing that we have to go back to Ottawa to get the work done. So we'll be there. We'll be pushing every single day on all these issues.
National Chief, interesting days ahead. Appreciate you taking some time here this morning for us.
Miigwech. Thank you.